Welcome to the Carriker Chronicles, the People's Show. Checking the pulse of Husker Nation, brought to you by DPS Concrete Construction. Check them out at dpsconstruction.net. Also, carrikerchronicles.com as well. I did not see that coming. Holy Moses Malone. It's just like almost like a gut punch. It's like, you seen that meme where like the guy's standing there, the other guy's just repeatedly kicking him in the balls over and over and over and over and over. That's how that felt. That's how this feels. I did not see that coming. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you just want to support the channel, hit the like button. That's all I got about that. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe and or ring the notification bell as well. All right, Nebraska loses 24-6 to Minnesota. Initial thoughts. My concerns coming into this game: we are more talented. We have the better skill guys. This is a Minnesota team that Purdue almost doubled up the amount of total yards that Minnesota had in the game. Yeah, Minnesota did find a way to win. Rutgers severely outgained Minnesota. Minnesota did find a way to win. Purdue and Rutgers didn't have a hard time moving the ball. They didn't struggle in the trenches. Oh, the trenches. The trenches. And I know 9 sacks, Dylan holding on to the ball, the offensive line not blocking, Rocco being knocked out of the game, Rocco Spindler, Elijah Pritchett getting thrown out of the game. You know, we have 7 guys, 7 offensive linemen. I did this. I told this up and talked about it on one of my shows last week leading into the Minnesota game. 7 guys with 162 combined total career starts, which means there's still 5 guys with double digits of career starts. These 7 guys had almost 250 career total football games they'd played in. We still had 5 guys, plus depth somewhere on the O-line. All right. Nebraska loses 24-6. My concerns was Nebraska going to be focused. I don't know that they weren't focused. It certainly was ugly. It certainly was sloppy. Maybe lack of focus could be. I can't definitively say, and when I say lack of focus, maybe distractions from Rhule to Penn State and all that talk. Maybe the back-to-back road games, which, by the way, every team deals with. Maybe the 2 road games inside of 6 days, going halfway across the country to Maryland, then going up to Minnesota and playing 2 road games in 6 days. Just being mentioned. I don't want to hear excuses about any of that. And I said that before the game ever played. Every team deals with something. This is not an anomaly or unique just to Nebraska. You know, Oregon at one point last year, they had a bye week early on in the season, and then they had their bye week right before the last game of the season. They had 8 straight weeks of conference games. And did you know the last 3 opponents they played all had a bye right before they played Oregon, and 2 of those 3 games were on the road, and Oregon still went undefeated in the regular season. No excuses. I don't want to hear any of that stuff, but I said, would we be focused? I don't know that this was lack of focus. It certainly wasn't sharp play. Okay. It certainly wasn't a whole lot of well-executed stuff. That's for sure. We didn't tackle well. We didn't block well. We didn't football well. This would be different had we played Ohio State. Had we played, Miami lost tonight. Miami lost to Louisville. Their quarterback threw 4 interceptions. So there's something positive that happened for us, I guess. Also, volleyball swept Michigan State. I believe volleyball has now beaten Michigan and Michigan State a combined 17 times in a row. So there's some positivity. But when you do this to Minnesota, who never has as much talent as you, they're 5-2 right now. How? I don't know. This is the least impressive looking team, I'll put it that way, Minnesota's had in at least half a decade. This might be the best Nebraska team when it's all said and done since 2016. I know, where's the bar? I get it. For me, it's frustrating because I saw 3 potential outcomes to this game. I saw us blowing them out, winning by double digits, 10 to 14 points, maybe even 17. I saw us winning close, and I saw us losing close. Nowhere on my radar did I see us getting blown out and dominated 24-6. The talent disparity in our advantage is crazy. Somebody wrote 8 sacks ? My friend, it was 9, unfortunately. Okay. As we do, let's go through the game. I am going to go through the game quicker than I normally do tonight. partially because I don't really want to relive it all that much. So we're going to go quickly. Here is some positivity. This was tweeted out. The Minnesota folks put this up in honor of Greg Sharp. Rest in peace, Greg Sharp. And if you remember, they did this after the unfortunate passing of Sam Foltz. So Minnesota has shown some class in the past, so much respect to them. All right, here's some more positivity. Nebraska ends their 0-for-6 coin toss losing streak. We're now 1-6 on coin tosses on the year. All right, the Tails call was successful, and the Huskers defer to the second half. All right, we started 5-1 this year. As we know, we ended 2024 after starting 5-1, 1-6, just an FYI. All right, so keep that in mind. Nebraska was rocking in breast cancer for breast. Oh, there's the shirt. I've never worn this shirt before. I don't know if you'll like it or not. I will get to your comments, thoughts, concerns, questions, or otherwise. Let me go through this quickly, and we're going to get to that. Nebraska, the pink N on the side of the helmet, the pink face mask. I always love, breast cancer awareness and things of that nature. Now, coming into this game, one of my other concerns, I had 3 concerns. One of them was turnovers. I don't think either team had a turnover tonight that I remember. We didn't lose the penalty battle. That was kind of lumped in. Penalties and turnovers. It wasn't a gargantuan one, but we did continue multiple drives for them when we were on defense with penalties on our defense, so that didn't help. But the trenches. I said the only area where I could foresee Minnesota having a physical advantage on us was in the trenches. I didn't know that they would. Rutgers moved the ball. Purdue moved the ball. They didn't struggle in the trenches versus Minnesota. I didn't know how our trenches would be. We got the answer tonight. Even on defense, they weren't like blowing us off the ball, but they were moving us back and they were getting 3, 4, 5 yards a carry. They averaged, I've got it written down somewhere, 5.8 yards per carry, 5.6 yards per carry. I think we averaged 1.6. You know what? I have it right here. Let me look. All right, yards per rush, 5.3 was the final. Oh, we were 5.2. Good Lord. Okay. Let me come back to this real quick. Please keep sending in your questions, your thoughts, your concerns, or otherwise. Both teams started with 3 and outs. All right, somebody's doing a super chat. Mike, shout out to you. Until we get even a mediocre O-line, this will be the result. 3D linemen lot our O-line up. I think you meant kind of beat our O-line up. Yeah, 9 sacks several times. Like Minnesota blitz, they didn't have to blitz a ton. They had multiple sacks with 3-man rushes. 3. All right, each team started with a 3 and out to start the game. I wrote Nebraska is struggling to run the ball. Said I love Emmett Johnson. He dances a little too much. Now looking back on it, he had no choice but to dance. He had to dance to try to find holes. All right, the Huskers did try a jumbo set early on in the game, which I like jumbo sets. I'm kind of a big fan of that, so to speak. I just like getting in there, being physical, things of that nature. All right. Let's get back to the notes here. See if you got any other thoughts, questions, comments, or concerns. Zach Bowman. There's no way that's my former teammate. Adam, please throw your name in coaching for the trenches. I would do anything to help this program that I possibly can. Hey, Ange, can you help me? I'm talking to my wife. My screen keeps going dark after 30 seconds, and I can't figure it out real quick. All right. So I have notes on papers, as always. I have notes on my phone. All right. Let's get to the next thing here. Why is Donovan Raiola still employed by the University of Nebraska? Is Rhule concerned that if he fires him, Dillon will leave, Dayton decommits, and Holgorsen leaves? I don't think Holgorsen's connected to any of this. When it comes to speculating about a coach's job, I mean, we just did a whole week of that with Rhule. Obviously, that was more of him going to Penn State, possibly, or staying, or whatever the case may be. We've got to do something to get much better in the trenches, to get much better on the offensive line, on the defensive line. You can't play 6 on 11 on offense. You can't play 6 on 11. I'm not saying that's exactly what it was, but there's times when it kind of has felt like that this year. And that puts everything at a big disadvantage offensively. All right. My wife has done a marvelous job and fixed my issue for me. So let's start going quickly here. Okay. All right. Apologize for this. Here we go. Here we go. Let's get to where we were. All right. One of the questions I had was in the trenches. Okay, let's get to it now. The Nebraska goes down the field, gets in the red zone. We get in the red zone a couple of times on our scoring drives. We can't punch it in either time. The red zone struggles unfortunately continue. We kick 2 field goals. That's how we get our 6 points. Okay. Minnesota comes back down. Malachi Coleman, former Nebraska Husker, gets a 15, 16-yard reception. All right. And then their running back, Darius Taylor, makes a 71-yard run. This is a team that had 34 yards rushing last week, by the way. 71-yard run down to our 1-yard line. They do the old tush push, put it on in, quarterback sneak it on in. Minnesota leads 7-3. There was multiple missed tackles on this long run. Essentially, I remember talking about on the ticket before the game, I was like, maybe don't blitz as much this game because Minnesota is not a great running team. And I know Butler wanted to run more man-to-man than he did versus Maryland. And I was kind of like, just don't do as much blitzing or mix it in because all it takes is one crease and they're gone. Whereas this team, if you make them run the ball consistently up and down the field, of course, they kind of did that in the second half. They may not be as apt or as good at doing that. So force them to do that. And of course, we have some missed tackles. There's a lane, 71-yard run. All right, there was some bad angles taken by players. Your angle of pursuit, how you catch a guy, also wasn't great. All right, let's see. At this point, I'm kind of skipping ahead here. Minnesota already had 3 sacks of Dylan Raiola at this point. They almost got a 4th. And I'm kind of like, I'm watching this unfold. I'm like, man, this feels like Minnesota games of the past. I don't really like what I'm seeing here. And they were averaging over 4 yards of play on first down. 4 yards of play on first down. Over 4 yards of play on first down. That's huge. 2nd and 6 is vastly different than the 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8. By the way, there was a point where Nebraska, our first 6 third downs of the game, we were averaging third down and 12. The gargantuan difference from them being 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5 to us being 3rd and 12 on our first six third down attempts. I can't even describe the disadvantage that puts us at. All right, let's see what I got here. After Nebraska's first 2 drives, we got all the sacks. We got the 33-yard field goal that Kyle Cunanan made. All right. Yep, done with that too. I've got written down here, there was a couple of drives that they had. Minnesota then went on a 14-play, 98-yard touchdown drive. They just kept extending plays. Okay. Their quarterback is very, very good. We had a penalty committed by Donovan Jones, which extended the drive for him. Okay, Andrew Marshall, who these are good players, by the way, had a holding call, which helped extend the drive. And I think I've seen this movie before. I thought we threw this video away already. Why am I watching this again? Another Minnesota game kind of unfold the same way. So Minnesota essentially has the lead at halftime. I'm kind of zooming through the game a little quicker than normal here. Okay, and I believe the score was 14-6, but here are the halftime notes. Here's what I wrote. This game has been ugly. Penalties, red zone issues, can't run the ball, under 2 yards per carry, sacked 4 times already. All right, halftime stats that stood out to me. First downs, we had 8. They had 5. We actually had more. They ended up with 18 first downs. We ended up with 13, but they had the big 71-yard touchdown run, or 71-yard run that set up the touchdown. Third down efficiency, we were 1 of 5, and this is where we were averaging a 3rd and 12 every time we were on third down. They were 3 of 7. They finished 5 of 12, almost 50% on third downs. Okay, which is a huge difference. We have one of the best third down defenses in the country, while we were 3 of 11. I don't know what that is. Is that like 20% conversion rate? Real quick, before we dive into the second half, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsors, DPS Concrete Construction. Check them out at dpsconstruction.net. When it comes to retaining wall work, concrete work, nobody does it better. Go to dpsconstruction.net. If this is the type of work that you do, you want to work for a guy like Jason Armstrong, who owns DPS Construction. Again, go to dpsconstruction.net. Also, Husker Auto Group, Husker Chevrolet and GMC have aggressive pricing on 2025 model Silverados and Sierras up to $11,000 off MSRP. APR as low as 2.9% financing with approved credit. See dealer for details. Husker Chevrolet and GMC also has a great selection of 3/4-ton Silverado and Sierra trucks. Husker Chevrolet and GMC is locally owned and operated. Husker Auto Group is conveniently located off North 27th Street and I-80 in Lincoln. Also available 24/7 at huskerautogroup.com. Rush yards, we had 34. By the way, we ended up with 46. We had 12 second half rush yards. All right, Minnesota had 102 at halftime. Yards per rush, it was 2, which was better than what we finished with, which was 1.2 yards per rush for the whole game. All right, they had 6.8 yards per rush. Hey, we brought it down to 5.3 by the end of the game. Yards per pass, we were at 9.4. We finished with 7.2. I think Dillon completed 66% of his passes. Their quarterback, Drake Lindsay, freshman's a stud. It's the third freshman quarterback we faced this year, by the way. All right, he completed 80% of his passes on the day. At halftime, he was completing average 5.2 yards per pass attempt. All right, it was 7-6 at halftime. Let me correct myself. The 7-6 halftime deficit ended a streak of 10 straight games the Huskers have led or been tied at halftime. All right, quarterback Dylan Raiola threw for 113 yards in the first half and increased his career passing yardage total to 4,523 yards, passing Eric Crouch, who was at 4,481 yards for 8th place on the career passing list. All right. Kyle Cunanan made 2 field goals. He's now 11 of 12 on the season. I did make a note. I was like, I think Dylan Raiola is playing his butt off. Not a lot's going right, but I feel like he's playing hard. Not a lot's going right. Emmett Johnson has nowhere to go. We must block a lot better. And then I talked about all the experience on the offensive line, so I don't want to hear a bunch of excuses is basically kind of what I was getting at there. All right, let's get to the second half here. 3 and out for Nebraska. All right, to start the second half. And I made a note. Right now, Minnesota, and this is zooming ahead into the middle of the third quarter, has 7 sacks, 8 TFLs. That's 15 times they've tackled us in the backfield. Obviously, they ended up with 9 sacks and more TFL. So maybe they tackled us in our backfield 20 times by the time the game was over. I don't know. At that point, Nebraska had 1 sack and 2 TFLs. So we had tackled them at that point 3 times in their backfield. Think about that. We gave up sacks at one point in the game on 18% of our plays. I don't know what the final percentage was. Almost 20% of our plays were sacks. I think we were 45 plays into the game. After 45 plays, we'd allowed 8 sacks at that point. Okay, let's see. Minnesota goes up, scores a touchdown. We don't do a whole lot on offense. Minnesota scores a touchdown again. It's 21-6. All right. They had outgained us at this point 140-21 in the second half. And again, I'm zooming ahead here. I'm trying to go quicker. All right. They had held the ball for 11 minutes and 31 seconds at that point in the second half. We'd had it for 5:57. They'd ran 20 plays. We ran 10. All right. They had a 35-yard screen pass, okay, which set up their last touchdown. It was a 62-yard drive with 12:32 to play. Minnesota at the Nebraska. We're going to zoom ahead here. In the fourth quarter, Dylan Raiola had performed really well so far this year. I talked about that on an earlier show. And about midway through the fourth quarter, I said, since the first quarter, Minnesota has 262 total yards. Nebraska has 112 total yards of offense. Obviously, things went downhill even from there. They ended up with 9 sacks. In the second half, they ran 27 plays. We ran 16 total. They had 182 yards. We had 33 yards total. They had the ball for 16 minutes. We had it for 9. They had 17 points. We had 0. All right. They obviously end up winning 24-6. Dylan Raiola was hurried 14 times, hit 11 times, and sacked 9 times. All right. Let's get to some of your questions, your thoughts, your comments, your concerns. That's the quickest I've ever gone through a game. Can you say, all right, James Fernbar, I hope I'm saying that right. Can you say pathetic on both sides of the ball? This is not a good team, bad plays, poor coaching. Okay, I know this is not the right time for this. Normally we need like 48 hours to simmer down. It's not a bad team. This is a horrible performance. This is a disappointing, horrible performance that I didn't see coming. They're not a bad team. They're going to finish with like at least 8 wins. And if you're 8-4 at the end of the regular season, it's not a bad team. This is a horrible performance and really no excuse for it. This is not a bad team. You could say certain things within the team. The performance has been bad at times throughout this year, but the team as a whole, I don't agree with that, even in the emotional moment that we're in right now. Okay, David Rodriguez, you need to start investing my money because he says, sucks to say it, I kind of saw this happening. What? One thing people can count on is the discipline in the Gophers. I would say if Nebraska needs to hit the transfer portal for O-line. We need to play better on the offensive line. We need to get bigger and more physical, more stout on the defensive line. Minnesota, 0 turnovers, 3 penalties on the night. I agree with you on the discipline thing. Now, I was off on my prediction for the game. I think most people were, other than David. Start investing my money, my friend. But I wasn't off on my concerns. Technically, we didn't lose the turnover battle, but we lost the penalty battle, and we extended multiple drives with defensive penalties for them. So technically, we lost the penalty and turnover battle. My 3 keys to the game, that was one of them because we lost the penalty battle. I was concerned about the trenches. We absolutely lost in the trenches. I said, how does a team like Minnesota beat a team like Nebraska when Minnesota's not particularly been impressive at all? Nebraska's been doing some good things, got to get better in areas. How does it happen? You show up unfocused. I still don't know that we were unfocused. I got a question. Do you feel like we quit in the game, or do you feel like the team played hard? Let me know in the comments. Do you feel like Nebraska played hard the entire game despite the score and the ugliness of it? Or do you feel like they quit at any point? I'm genuinely curious what people have to say. Let me know in the comments. Okay. I don't know if we were focused or unfocused. We definitely were not sharp. So maybe we didn't achieve being focused. We definitely didn't win the trenches. We definitely lost the penalty battle. So all my prediction was wrong, but my concerns. If you're going to lose to a team like Minnesota, this is how you do it. And those were what my concerns were. And they unfortunately came to fruition. Okay, enemy ancestor. I know you're joking, but you said 11 wins. You weren't a math major. I wasn't either, but wow. Some folks think they gave up. The team is young. I think that's a fair point. You're going to be wildly inconsistent when you're young. That doesn't excuse a performance like this. Okay, let's see if there's any other overall stats I'd like to look at here. Total yards, they outgained us by almost 150 total yards. They dominated us in the third down efficiency. Yards per pass, we were at 7.1. They were at 7.7, but they completed 80% of their passes. I had a much higher completion percentage, won the time of possession by a couple of minutes here. All right. Let's see what else I got. Here's something I got. As bad as Minnesota played versus Purdue and Rutgers, and Minnesota has more talent than Purdue and Rutgers, they found a way to win, and they found a way to not get dominated, and they found a way not to get embarrassed in the trenches. We were not able to attain the same thing. That's why they won those games, and that's why this game went the way this game went. All right, let's see. Husker fans, here's what I think. Husker fans deserve better. No excuses not to win more often versus Minnesota. Do I really have to go through the whole white jerseys thing? We've worn them 11 times since 2002. We're 3-8. The last time we wore them before tonight, we lost to Indiana 56-7. Then this happens tonight. We've lost 6 in a row to Minnesota, 7 out of 8, 5 in a row in Minneapolis. There, was that fun? Okay, Husker fans deserve better. There's no excuse not to win more often versus Minnesota. No excuse not to compete better. No excuse for our offense not to be able to perform better than this. 1.2 yards per rush, 9 sacks given up, 46 total rush yards, 12 rush yards in the second half, 7.2 yards per pass attempt. If you're going to be that low, you at least got to have a little higher completion percentage. I honestly felt like Dylan fought hard for this. I did. I don't know that he played well, but he fought hard. Minnesota, on the other hand, had 185 rush yards. They don't miss tackles. We missed a lot of tackles. 5.4 yards per rush, 80% completion percentage, almost 50% conversion rate on third down, 0 turnovers, and as I mentioned, only 30 penalty yards. All right. I'm surprised, frustrated, and everything else. I will say this. This is going to sound crazy at this point in time. 8 wins is still right there. I said that was the floor. I said if we lost to Minnesota and Northwestern, we walk out of, hopefully we beat Northwestern. We walk out of October 6-2, win half your games in November, you're 8-4. That's with a bowl game looming. That's still the floor to me. there's no excuse for that not to be still the floor. We better beat Northwestern at home. All right. Let me know your answer to these comments, these questions below. These questions are brought to you by Husker Auto Group. Check them out at huskerautogroup.com. Also, you can follow me on the social medias if you'd like. All right, TikTok, Facebook, and X. Here are my questions, and I got a bonus one for you. 1, how do we play better against Michigan than we did Minnesota? Thoughts? 2, what's the biggest change that needs to happen going forward? 3, well, I guess it's just 3 questions. All right. How do we keep losing to less talented teams? Minnesota, in the last 2 games, had a combined 0 sacks. Combined, the last 2 games, they had 9 tonight. How does stuff like that happen? Let me know your answer in the comments below. Go Big Red Nose. Remember to throw the bones.